والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Good morning everyone and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are pleased here to have all of you, and on behalf of all of you would like also to welcome and thank very much Prof. Mustafa Omar Muhammad, who is the former head of the Department of Economics. At the same time, he's the director. Currently, he's the director of Center for Islamic Economics in the International Islamic University in Malaysia. But he is with us now in Turkey, in Istanbul. So I would like to thank him very much actually for giving us part of his precious time actually to share with us from his long experience given in supervising the PhD and the master students. As you know all that this is the biggest challenge which the students are facing is actually writing their thesis in order for them to graduate, which is at least in the case of the master level, it is equivalent to at least 50% of the program, and in the case of the PhD even carry even more weight than the master. So it is really a challenge, especially if you have not coming from a research background, so you will face a lot of problems. So inshallah today we'll try to with Prof. Mustafa to answer as many questions as possible which you have. So I would like to thank him very much and pass to him the floor inshallah. So Dr. Tfaddal.
Just before doing that, I think Professor Mustafa has updated the presentation. Is this the updated one or an old version?
Yes, yes. This
Yes,
updated
Updated
version.
one.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Bismillah.
So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. First of all, I would like to thank my two dear brothers, colleagues, I don't know how to call them, whom I have always, we are just together. At the top, of course, I have Dr. Chachi, whom I have known from 2007 in Jeddah until today. And also I quoted some of his works in my PhD, those interesting works on Islamic finance. And then also I thank him for, helping to translate some of this writing. And secondly, of course, I have Dr. Sharif, whom I have known since Malaysia. And we have been working together in a lot of projects with Dr. Sharif, including supervision. And this is also enriching experience because when you move from one university to other universities, you also see different nature of challenges and how to overcome those challenges, whether they are written in Arabic or in English. So these are all enriching experiences. And I could see also in the audience some faces which are familiar among the students. I also welcome all of you. So basically this is an overview because when you discuss things on like research, and maybe later I'll sit down with Dr. Sharif and maybe also Dr. Chachi. We need to break down these sessions into several sessions, focusing on each area one by one. For example, area on first the introductory chapter. This you need a session by itself. Then session on literature review, a session by itself. Methodology, a session by itself, results, session by itself, conclusion. So all these we need to reinforce with practical examples so that it is nearer to people to understand. But nevertheless, inshallah, whatever we have here, we can share with everybody what we have been doing earlier. And of course, throughout the discussion, we'll be having, pointing out some of the challenges that students face when they write their dissertation and even when they write research papers or they write papers for publications. And so I will basically, since we have 2 hours slot, I will speak for 1.5 hours and then give the other half hours for discussion. Oh, this thing is moving so fast, huh? Even without touching, it's moving. Okay. So I will just move quickly to the first one. Before you begin writing, you need to ask yourself this tough question, whether you're a consultant or a researcher. And based on my experience, that at the beginning, 80% of the students behave like consultants rather than researchers. What is the difference? The difference is that a consultant already knows what the problem is and wants to provide solution. That's why you find in the writing of students the word solution. Solution always come, and then they think that they can change it immediately. So when they come with the idea of their proposal, they'll say, sir, in the market there is this and this, and I think I want to provide a solution. And somebody will come and say, I know this thing happening in the economics industry. I want to provide a solution. So all the time is the idea of solution. And if you think in that range, then you are actually a consultant. But a researcher is a person who wants to know the extent of the problem. He knows that there's a problem, but how big, how small is the problem? And then the researcher provides a recommendation at the end of the problem for the consultant to take it up and provide a solution. So if you think along that line, then you become a researcher. That's why students, they come up with the results before even they start doing the work. So you're a consultant. But if you don't know what the end result is, you are happy exploring. Just imagine you reach Turkey for the first time and people tell you that Turkey is beautiful. And then you begin exploring all historical places. And then you're a researcher because you're trying to find out how beautiful Turkey is, how these... the same thing when you are in your research work, you want to find out the extent of the problem. Now, this I will go through very quickly. This usually you'll find them in the books. The idea of qualitative research or quantitative research. Some of you have good qualitative background. That means they have ability to think. They have very strong, Sharia background. They have strong, background on things that are qualitative in nature. They may want to do qualitative research. But there are those who are also have good background in mathematics, good background in certain software that we use for analysis. So this kind of people may think that, okay, why don't I do something quantitative? And others, mashallah, they may have strength in both qualitative and quantitative. Then they may need to have a mixed method. So depending on the choice of what we go through. So this one I'll go through quickly so that I can save time. About the nature of research, this you will read later in the slides. Now, how do you describe a good dissertation or a good thesis? To me, a good thesis is where I draw a straight line, and later I will show you how the straight line is. When I look at your issues that you have articulated in your introduction, and I look at your research problem, then I look at the objectives of your study, and then look at how these gaps identified in the literature review, and what methodologies are used to achieve those research objectives, and whether there is a connection, coherence between the results and the methodology and the objectives and the problem that's being articulated, and whether the discussion is sufficient enough to address those results. When I see there's a coherence across right from all these 7 main areas, then I said, okay, this is a good work. But if somebody comes up with a very big topic, then suddenly he uses a methodology which does not conform. For example, somebody will say, okay, I want to study, I give example of one of our students. He's saying, okay, I want to see to what extent does quality service gives satisfaction to customers in Islamic banking, for example. And so this he wants to see the relationship between quality service and the satisfaction of customers in Islamic banking. Then suddenly when he comes to the methodology, he says, historical approach to methodology. Now there's already a problem. You want to study relationship, then you go to history, and maybe those relationships don't exist in history in the first place. Or you come up with a method, you say, okay, literature review. Of course, it may be literature review, but still, a lot of things will not be answered. So the choice of methodology and the choice of the results that it produces out of this methodology will really tell to what extent there is a coherence in what you have chosen. So basically, what I'm telling you is that you need to align all of this so that it becomes something very, very good for students to write. How do you choose your topic? I think these are very interesting because many students sometimes they will approach Dr. Chachi and say, do you have a topic for me to do? And sometimes Dr. Sharif, do you have a topic? And sometimes, during the class lecture, you see, the lecturer is giving a talk and you hear very interesting things being mentioned in the class, then you choose it as a topic. And sometimes lecturers themselves in the class, they can suggest topics for students to take. And in other instances, it becomes like you are, what do you call it? It becomes like something like reading. You have to read. And finally, I'm trying to move this thing away. It keeps on, I don't know how to move it away because when I, okay. Because it's covering my slides, Doctor. How do I press on it, move it or what?
Here it looks fine, Doctor. We can see clearly your presentation.
Yes, you can see clearly. Okay, but it keeps on. Okay, no problem. Khair, inshallah. After readings, what is the last thing in the slide? Because the thing is covering. What is it?
Now is how do you choose your topic?
I know, but I said I have here 4 slides. I have lecture, readings, and then the next one is what?
Colleagues. Colleagues.
What? Colleagues. Okay, okay, good. Yeah, you can get also from your colleagues ideas. But my suggestion to students is that whether you get the idea from classrooms, you get it from the lecturer, or you get it from your colleagues, this one in green is very important. Don't just pick it up like this. You need to do your own readings so that it becomes your own topic. Because if you don't do your own readings, what you will normally do is you will go to the lecturer, you'll go to your colleagues. So how do I continue from here? How do I continue from here? But if you do your own readings, then you have a kind of assurance. So you develop that kind of confidence. So my suggestion is, wherever you choose your topic from, please ensure that you read to instill that confidence in you. Now, I assume that I'm trying to make, I make this is what Dr. Chachi says is an addition in my slides. Suppose that this is the topics that we have chosen for our study. You're going to write on this topic. Analysis of student absenteeism in Islamic economics class. The case of the Department of Economics and Finance at ISO. So this is your topic. So the immediate thing that you should look at topics, any topic that you come up with, they must have the main theme and sub-themes. And this is very, very important for students to be able to identify what is your main theme and what is your sub-theme. Because it is the main theme that leads to identifying your issues, identifying your problems. And if you get the main theme wrongly and the sub-theme wrongly, then your research goes in a wrong direction. So in the case of this topic, do you want me to ask you somebody to help and identify? What do you think is the main theme among my audience, the students? What do you think
We
would
have
be the
Salim, we have Yusuf.
yes?
We actually.
Okay, Salim, what do you think is the main theme here?
I think it's student absenteeism.
Excellent. Jazakumullah khair. Yes, that's excellent. So student absenteeism is the main theme. So all the other ones are sub-themes. Islamic economic class is a sub-theme. Department of Islamic Economics and Finance is a sub-theme. And ISU is a sub-theme. So what normally people are interested in this sub-theme is they want to know the significance, they want to know the scope, magnitude. For example, if the Islamic economics class is only 5 students, then people will say, why then study when you have only 5 students? What sense does it make? Or if the entire department is only 20 students, then people say, what's the point? So these are sub-themes that gives us the magnitude, the significance, the scope of what you want to study. And when people look at absenteeism within this context, it makes a sense. It's just like a background of a movie. So identifying the main theme and sub-themes are very, very fundamental. Then, after you have identified your topic, in our case, the topic, then you need to do what we call intelligence gathering. You need to refine your topic. So what normally we do is we need to do a scan reading, meaning you pick up 4 or 5 articles to read. And those articles will give you a bigger idea. But usually we start with conceptual article. You need to understand the concepts very well. What is the concept of absenteeism? What is the concept of this? What is the concept of this? So those concepts are very important that you articulate. If you choose something on sukuk, Islamic bond, you need to understand the concept of sukuk first, because this will have implication. If you take something on green finance, you need to understand the concept of green finance. So you need basically to have a scan reading on conceptual, something conceptual. Then you choose good articles, later I will show you, just to help you stimulate your thinking, your mind. Then after this level, you have what we call meta-analysis, which I will show you. So the idea of meta-analysis is you want to look at trends in the literature. And this is also important when you do your literature review, because normally students, their literature review is like they're picking trees from forest. I want this tree, I want that tree, I want that tree. Ahmad and Muhammad, 2011. Okay, I picked this one. Or this one is 2008. This one, 2005. Or, you know, Muhammad said this, Ahmad said this. So they're hiding behind those. So it doesn't help in your literature review. Your literature review becomes something segmented. Segmented. Did I move something? Okay. Now, so when you have your topic, as I told you, you pick one good article, conceptual one, for example, on student absenteeism, based on our topic. Then you choose 5 latest good articles on absenteeism. Now, the question is, what is a good article? Yes, Brother Ramadani, you want to say what a good article is? What's a good article?
I could say a good article is something that is too much related or close to your topic. It covers the same theme that you are dealing with.
Okay, good. This is one. Something that really covers what you want to do. And where do you get this good article from? Suppose you have books, you have sometimes, you know, journal articles. Which journal articles you will always go to? We have somebody here, Arzu. Huh?
Professor Mustafa is asking question. Please respond. Please be interactive.
Yeah, Brother Arzu. Is it?
And raise your hand whenever you want to speak, or you can speak just by unmuting your phone.
Yes, yes, Yusuf, Brother Yusuf.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So my thinking is that maybe we look for the highly cited, articles in the same domain. So at least we cover the most talked about in the literature.
Excellent. I think that's a good answer. Yeah. So we look at the most cited. We go, and usually you have index journals like ISI, Scopus, because normally they accept good articles. And so please, you need to look at those highly cited articles. Because if you go on, get some books, and usually students want things that are around them. So you deny yourself the right to have, good materials that could give good quality to your work. So my advice is try to choose the word latest. Latest usually, by definition, means something from your time to at least 5 or 10 years. This is latest. If you're in 2021, you go 5 years back or 10 years back, these are latest. So once you have those articles after reading, then you need to increase your group of articles to do what we call meta-analysis, to do meta-analysis.
May I say something here, Professor, before you continue?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
From my experience, I have examined maybe about 100 PhD and master students at ISU University in Arabic. I only contributed to 1 or 2 in English with Dr. Sharif. Yeah. But most of the thesis written in Arabic, the writers claim that they have not found anything related to the subject. They are the first one to come to with this title, with this theme, and they only look for 2, 4, maybe 5, 6 maximum dissertation, PhD or master. They don't go to any journal, and they claim that they have not found anything in this field.
Yeah, so I don't think that is really true, because mashallah today we have a lot of previously the last 20 years that claim may be justified to some extent, but today mashallah you have a lot of good journals in Arabic that really write on the topic, and if that person claims that work is not there, then that person has to do explorative study, meaning that you need to conduct preliminary interviews with experts in that area, so that you can enrich your understanding, enrich areas in the issues, because I don't think anything will come new. There has always got to be something which is related, and if it is not in that area, it can be in related areas that you can borrow. So the arguments usually that there is no work in that total area, I think is not justified. So students should always try to look for it. Yeah, I think this is a common what do you call it? A common justification students give, but I don't think it's right. Yeah. So now we move to meta-analysis. Thank you, Dr. Chachi. So for meta-analysis, usually our recommendation is we need to have some call it a meta-matrix. They have different names for it. But Doctor, I usually suggest...
Please make it full screen.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I suggest that we have 3 lists. The first list is usually general. And then the second list is, usually you have to rank those articles. And then the third one is where you identify issues. Today, mashallah, I think with the advancement of computers, many of you are very lucky, because this thing you can just do it on the computer, and other people have programming. They are very good at algorithm. When they program, the computer can just pick up those things and arrange for you. And others who are also using Mandali, then these are very easy for them to do those arrangements of the list of articles. So if you imagine what we have said, okay, we have identified our topic already. So in this topic, we need to have these three lists. List number one, you'll have your article by title, topic, type, the publisher, and the year. And as I told you, the last 10 years will be interesting for you. And from this first list, you create the second list, ranking. And from the second list, you create a third list, which I will show you shortly. So what is our first list? Sorry. List number one, let's assume, for the sake of assumption, these are hypothetical titles, which I just chose to make it interesting for us. One is you have college student absenteeism. This you have journal written maybe in America, written in different countries globally. You find this article very interesting about absenteeism. And then you find second article written on Turkish universities. You say, oh, this seems to be really nearer to my work which I'm doing. And then the third one, talk about Islamic universities. You said, okay, this also have interest since ISU and my department is something to do with Islamic economics. This has an interest to me. And then the other article you find is, economics department. You say, oh, okay, so there's something on economics here. And then you also find something on ISU. So you said, oh, okay, so they are very interesting articles. Let's say you compile 15, 20, it doesn't matter, good articles. So the next thing you do to these articles is that you compile, you need to rank them, create list number 2. What article is nearer to what you are researching on? That means you are shortlisting your articles. So the nearer they are, the higher you give them the ranking, the stars. So let us say you have 1 star because this one is a bit far. Then this one is good, but you give it 2 stars. This one you think is nearer to you, 3 stars, and maybe this one you give 4 stars. The nearer they are, you can go until 5 stars, depending on your ranking. And so usually what you could do is you first begin picking 5 and 4 stars article. From the beginning, 5 and 4 stars article. Because the other articles, you will add them later in your literature review. Because the 4 and 5 stars will help you to formulate your opinion and come up with a good research on the problem of the research and later for your literature review. So what is the third one then? The third list is where you come up with the issues. You come up with the issues. And this is where the interesting part comes. You see, let's say the first article, you find there are 5 issues. These are all hypothetical. I'm just coming hypothetical. You have, what are the issues? Is that students are absent because of traffic jam. Studies show that they oversleep. They have lack of interest in the classes. The class facilities are not good. So you find that among all, lack of interest seems to be, high in terms of frequencies in all the articles, and then, and then you find that here I'm talking about group of articles. Let's say you have 4 or 5 articles here. You find that this one ranked higher, and then overslept, and this one, class facilities is the least. So when you go to the next year, 2020. You find suddenly that class facility is missing in all the articles. Articles no longer mention about class facilities. Then gives you an idea. You see, these are very important. You have to, take note of these things, because later in your literature review, this is a very interesting trend which people want to see. You will say that because you'll be classifying by certain years, you said in the early periods, class facilities used to be an important factor for students not attending. But as time goes by, it seems, and this will be your interpretation, that universities in Turkey have improved, and so class facilities are no longer the issue to be looked at. But if you see, interestingly also, that lack of interest was 10, but now here it dropped to 5. That means more students are becoming interested in studies, so lack of interest is not becoming an issue in the first place. Then you go to the same year, you find traffic jam still a very big issue. Although it was not an issue earlier on, now it's becoming an issue. What does it tell you? It tells you that many students may be staying in a cosmopolitan area. You see, those data by itself, they explain things, you see. Even before you start your literature review, you already have a very interesting story to tell, a story about already. So when you'll be writing your literature review, you see, you're interacting with the literature. You're no longer saying, Ahmad said this, it is really relevant for my work. No, you are really interacting. Interacting with trend of literature over 5-10 years. You are looking at the development of those issues. Which issue remain relevant, which issues remain irrelevant, which new issues have come up, and later we'll see what new issues have come up. Because sometimes students just stop at this. Believe me, don't stop at this. Take your Turkish coffee and think out of the box, means out of this literature. What is there in your environment which can trigger your mind that this could be an issue? And this is where dissertation becomes interesting.
So for 2021, we could say lockdown, COVID-19 lockdown.
Exactly. You see, so Dr. Chacha has seen, something ahead already. So this is a new variable already. You see, lockdown, exactly. That's very interesting. Thank you. So then the other interesting thing when we get started is also the way we have the writing, our writing style. So let me recapitulate that after selecting our topics, we need to refine these topics through our readings, through sharing with colleagues, but ultimately we read. And we need to refine further by having a scanned reading of good articles to give us a magnitude. And then we may do some kind of a preliminary meta-analysis to help us have a grasp of what the issues are and what the direction of the study is. Then we become ready to begin writing or have a draft of our first chapter, and then moving on later to the second chapter, the literature review. And usually my advice is that in writing, our style of writing, the topics are very important, how you relate to themes of your topic. And here, as I said, topic may be in terms of themes and sub-themes. We have already seen that. What are the themes? What are the sub-themes? So my advice usually is that when you start your writing, the sub-themes become the background, that we should write them first, because it lets us appreciate the importance of the theme, the main theme. So from your topic, you have derived your themes and sub-themes. Can you see my cursor? Because I'm going from topic downward here. Can you see the cursor?
Yes, we can see the cursor.
Okay, good. Very good. So from topic, you come to themes and sub-themes. So my advice is begin with the sub-themes so that you can convince your reader about the important significance of your work and the magnitude of the work. And later I'll share with you what they are. Then as you go into your chapters, which is divided into sections and subsections, then these themes also must run across. And then within the chapters, you have paragraphs. And in paragraphs, usually principal statements are very, very important. That means people want to know what is it that this paragraph is going to talk about. And usually this is the problem with students, They write their first statement in the paragraph. It's not heavy loaded. It's not really loaded to tell you what the entire paragraph is about. They just start, just like somebody, For example, you are writing about, first paragraph, you want to talk about absenteeism in ISO. Let's say, for example, you cannot begin by saying, students, they get absent and somebody's already lost. But if you begin with a very good number, you say, for example, in ISO, a student absenteeism is becoming critical due to issues related to 1, 2, 3, 4. You've already given a very big idea to a person who is reading your work. So in any topic, you have to have those principal statements, and later you can ask more about that. Okay.
I think Salim has a question.
Yes, please, Salim.
Yes, Professor. Just going back to the issue of the topic with the themes and sub-themes, because this is one issue I'm facing always when we talk about, because our research on Islamic economies is generally at the crossroads of many themes, of the Islamic background at least, and let's say the conventional background also. And I'm struggling sometimes to see how far or how wide should be our literature review. Should we cover in the literature review both the main themes and the sub-themes, or we really converge, as you just showed, with the papers that are most relevant because they're already at the crossroad of the two let's say mainstreams of research?
Okay, excellent question. First of all, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I because my thing was minimized, I could not see. So you have one of what we call the giants of research attending, and thank you very much. It's an honor to have you really attend this session. Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, so Brother Salim, coming to this, if you remember when I showed you the topic, usually don't be distracted by sub-themes. If you are distracted by sub-themes, then the focus of your work is also distracted, because the theme of your work, the main theme, is where your contribution will come from. Your contribution will come from this main theme. So many students, unfortunately, they get distracted by these sub-themes. And you find a lot of writing they explain, even in dissertation. Somebody's writing, let's say, about, sukuk integration between, let's say, sukuk and waqaf in Indonesia. So the key word here is that integration of that. People are interested in looking at that integration between sukuk and waqaf. But you find most of the writing is about sub-theme, which is Indonesia. And then another one is about sub-theme waqaf. And then small thing on this main theme, which people are interested in learning. So my view here is that knowing your theme well, believe me, is the secret of remaining focused. People become distracted if they are not sure of the theme of their writing. And that's why I advise you, I said, look at those highly cited articles, try to stimulate your thinking in that area. But if people are not reading properly, then they become just complacent with what they have. They think, okay, I move here. Then suddenly you get, I just give you an example really, which is very interesting. Even Prof. Kabir is here. We're writing a paper with him. And there was really something which, frankly speaking, I did not read. So he sent to me, a writing. He says, have you read about this? It was something to do with electronic money related to the central bank. And when I went and read it, it gave a total dimension to the theme of the writing. So you see, when you read, it stimulates and it becomes very interesting. You find that the quality change, the dimension change. So these are the kind of things which I'm saying we have to remain focused on the main theme of the writing. Does it answer your question, Brother Salim?
Yes, thank you very much. So basically the sub-themes are there to give some background and to help maybe in the introduction or in the first part, but when not really digging into the literature review, we should focus on the main theme and not be distracted by the other ones.
Exactly. So it enhances your work. So that, imagine when you see a movie, when you see a movie, you know, these people who produce a movie are very interesting. They start giving you first the background, you know. You will see a horse running in a desert. Can you imagine that the horse is in a desert, then suddenly they bring a skyscrapers? I'm sure you'll be confused about this movie. How come, you know, this is a desert area, then the skyscrapers come? You know, you get confused. But when they zoom on the character later, the main actor of the movie, you'll find that everything rotates around this main actor. They will not start focusing on rivers and all this, and you become more confused. So the same logic in writing. So you need to have, you know, those not distracted by those other sub-themes. Okay. So moving forward, these are some of the interesting things that we need to look at when we write a background or the introductory topic. So the background would justify our topic. It's a motivation of that topic. And usually we require a lot of statistics. And many, believe me, numbers speak a lot. Because if you want people to know the magnitude of the thing, you know, people to understand certain things. If you give a number, sometimes people give what we call number. The term they use is they give a lateral statistics, you know, at some point in time. But I want you sometimes to take the trouble of, you know, showing your number 10 to 20 years. If the number is small, then you need to give a magnitude by 10, 20 years so that people can appreciate the trend of that work. So in this first introduction, numbers plays a very, very important role, statistics, so that people can appreciate. And then you have also to raise issues and zoom on them and argue for a preliminary gap in your introduction, because the detail will come in your literature review, and then you need to write thematically. So let us go in the example that I'm showing. Okay, I'll move to the example now about also the problem. Okay, and in this introduction also, we need to show the problem of the study. And I always tell the student that student confuse between identifying the problem and defining the problem. Again, I go back. In your background here, after you come up with the issue, then from the issue, you need to define your problem. Now, what's the difference between identifying problem and defining problem? Identifying problems are the issues. When students, you remember, we have those issues. What were the issues we said earlier on now? From the issues that we had just said about the absenteeism. Can you remember? One of them we said was traffic jam, these hypothetical issues. The second issue is
lack of interest.
Lack of interest.
COVID-19.
Exactly.
Lockdown.
Exactly. So many students, they will just stop there. And they think that this is already defining the problem. The literature found that there's lack of this, lack of this, lack of this. Now he or she wants to write. What are you going to write from here? Because you are writing what others have done. You are reproducing what the literature has said. So when you go to their work, you find that what is your contribution, brother or sister? You have just said what others have said. So there's
They
nothing
think that
new.
the contribution is in their solutions they give to those old past problems, past issues, maybe already been solved.
Exactly. So if you think about solution, as I told you earlier, then you are not a researcher, you're a consultant. You're not a researcher. Because a researcher wants to know the extent of the problem and then provide recommendation. But now here you are only looking at the problem of others. What is it that you are contributing to show others that these are the extent of the problem is missing? Okay, so let's move forward. I will show you what I mean by that. Okay, let's assume this is our chapter 1 that we are beginning. And I told you earlier, these are our sub themes, and this is the main theme. So we need to give a background of Sabahattin University. People want to know the history, the programs, the population, the facilities, so that they can appreciate that, wow, you see there are a lot of number of students, and you know, the percentage is high, blah, blah. So it is worth studying absenteeism in this kind of an environment. Then your Department of Economics also, people will look at it relevant to the university. So they need to compare the scope. And also they need to compare the scope of your class. If this one is good, this one is good, suddenly they find here 10 students. They say, brother, why don't you study at least the department is better? Or at least study the university. Why study 10 students? Huh? So people can raise question. Even you yourself, you'll think the sample CSV is too small to study. Maybe I need to look at it at the department level, or maybe at the university level. So this even help yourself to position yourself well. Then you need to give a background, also statistics. People want to know of absenteeism in ISU and in that class. Is it really an issue? Or is something just you pick it up, somebody say, you know, many students come absent these days, and we need to find out. Then you pick it up as a consultant and said, okay, I'll provide solution without having the numbers or the statistics. So you need to have the numbers to convince others that, oh yes, absenteeism is really a problem. But if you find in your statistics that only 1 or 2 students, then people say, why study? So these are very, very important to allow people to appreciate those magnitude. This is what I'm talking about. Then you come to the next area. Now you are entering into your themes of the study. The themes of the study. Remember, we had traffic jam, overslap, lack of interest. And Dr. Chachi says, after taking his Turkish coffee, he thought out of the box. There are 2 issues that are not covered in the literature. And this becomes a very good contribution to your work. You are asking a question. Don't say that COVID is an issue, because you don't know. You are a researcher. So the way you put it is to say, is there really any literature that talk about, you know, COVID-19? If not, how important is COVID-19 relationship with absenteeism? The weather condition, they change it. This is just hypothetical. I'm just thinking about in order to help this discussion. Okay. So after you come up with these problems, defining the problem means what is it that you are going to provide new, which early studies have not done. Okay. Let's assume that the study on traffic jam was done in other countries, not in Turkey. Then you have to think out of the box. What is it that is so important to study traffic jam in Turkey? Okay, maybe in that environment only few students use cars, or many students use car, but in Turkey they use public transport. Many students use public transport. So your addition here will be that this traffic jam only related to certain type of a vehicle, which is private vehicle, but maybe there's no study on how it relates to public transport. Maybe, I'm just speculating. And then oversleeping, other studies did it, okay? But here, maybe there, oversleeping, you will look at the factors that made people oversleep. They remain outside for a long period on their gadgets, etc. Maybe here the reasons for oversleeping is different, whether it contributes. And then COVID also, all these factors, you have to give your contribution. What is it that is new that you are contributing? And so this one will definitely then translate, the new thing will translate into your objectives of the study. But generally, as I told you earlier, the first objectives is usually general. It comprises all these issues that you are trying to examine in your study. And then the second will go specifically to state what your contributions are. As we said, we pointed out this blue, that maybe, for example, this is something new, this is something new. So it becomes an additional contribution to the objective of your study. Any questions so far? Okay. Now, these are the common problems that people have when they try to define a problem in a study. I found in masters and also among PhD. The first thing is that when your scope of study is very narrow, then you have a problem of coming up with good issues in that study. When the problem becomes narrow? When the study is very descriptive. Somebody will come with a topic as, for example, mudaraba in the Sharia. Of course, this will be more descriptive. Somebody will just be talking about mudaraba. Mudaraba until the end. Poverty in Islam, naturally it will be descriptive. There are not a lot of issues. So the choice of your topic will really help you to have something that will articulate a lot of issues in your writing. And the second thing that is usually happening why people don't define a good problem is that they don't exhaust the issues. In the literature, they don't have sufficient issues. They just look at one or two studies, just like Dr. Chachi mentioned, 3-4 articles, 3-4 books. Then they identify only one or two issues. Then this becomes a problem, because in these two issues, how would you be able to articulate, defining your problem within just these parameters of two issues? So we need to have good journal articles that is highly cited with a lot of issues, so that you are in a forest of issues that will stimulate your mind to have a meaningful contribution. Sometimes studies are very old, and this is actually most of the time. You remember when we are doing our meta-analysis now? You take a study that is 15 years old. Believe me, many of these issues have already been overtaken by time. Then when you come to present, people say, which world are you coming from? Because it doesn't make sense. So please try to choose current articles. And that is why many of us, when we send to the journals, we say, they are very unfair. Of course, they should be unfair for you, because when your articles, when the literature are old, they will not accept because your issues are not there. Sometimes we have wrong samples that we choose for our studies, the wrong instrument, and the method of analysis are not robust. These are all some of the common areas in past studies where you could identify your problems. When you look at those studies, the scope is narrow. You look at those studies, issues are not sufficiently addressed. You can add more. Studies are very old. That means you have chances to contribute more to those studies. People use wrong samples. This can also be a contribution to the problem. People use wrong instruments, or the method of analysis is not robust. So these are all areas where you can identify your problems. Now, from what we have done, I just give you a sample. This is a hypothetical sample of the problem of the study. I was just thinking aloud at night. This is how we could come with our hypothetical, topic that we have identified. You begin first, if you remember, I said you have to give a short background. So we said absenteeism among students of higher learning is a common problem being experienced by many universities globally. Studies done in a period of 10 years, from 2010 to 2020, show that on average, over 30% of students do not attend their classes in every semester of the year. Istanbul Sabahattin University is no exception. Though the average absenteeism in ISU is 24% per semester among students, the percentage is extremely higher at 40% in the Islamic economic classes, Department of Islamic Economics and Finance. Now you see, if you give this one already, somebody tries to see at the global average, look at ISU, and then look at your department and says, wow, it's really very serious. This problem is serious and it warrants studies. Then you enter into the area of the issues. And you said several studies have documented numerous reasons why students become absent. Then you start talking about a traffic jam, blah, blah, list them. And then you say that a meta-analysis of the trend show that these issues, blah, 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 have not become an issue, but the 5 remains constant. Namely, these are the issues that remain constant. So that's not the end of the story. Still, our research problem continues. Discussion on these 5 issues are focused on conventional universities in developed countries. There's hardly any serious work done on examining these issues in setting of Islamic universities like ISO, with distinct culture, curriculum, and motivation. Furthermore, evidence shows that emerging issues such as COVID-19 and weather conditions could have strong, you see, you're using the word, could have strong correlation to students' absenteeism from classes. The extant literature is silent on these issues, which raise the following pertinent research questions. To what extent do traffic jam, lack of interest, blah, 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 contribute to student absenteeism in a setting of Islamic universities like Sabahuddin University? To what extent do COVID-19 and weather conditions contribute to student absenteeism? So you're telling your reader, you don't know about this thing. You want to find out. And this is something which the literature is not able to articulate and examine properly. So this becomes your research gaps, which you want to research on. So it becomes clear to the people that, wow, this guy really has a research problem to deal with. Are you with me? Ramadan, are you following?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, Prof, we follow.
Okay, so this is how you articulate your research problem, showing a short background so that people should look at the magnitude of the issue and why your work is very important. What are the issues? Have these issues been constant over the years? As I told you, I was coming with an issue, then Dr. Kabir says, no, there's one issue you should look at. So he sent to me that issue. Then I said, well, okay. So I revised those issues. So it becomes as if something new into the equation. So what are those issues? And then you raise the question on those issues to show that you don't know how big or small this magnitude is. You are going to research. But some students, sometimes they write as if they know. They say, therefore, COVID-19 leads to student absenteeism. Then somebody says, how do you know? You have not even done the research yet. How do you know it leads to this absenteeism? So you must put yourself in a state of research saying that, well, I'm still going to research on these issues. And so this is very important, the way you put your wordings. Don't trap yourself in a situation where people ask you a question and you cannot answer. So because you are a researcher, you are not a consultant. Okay? So moving on, now we look at research objectives and research questions, which is, I told you earlier, derived from the research problem. And the first objective normally explore the extent of the problem or the challenge. The second objective justifies the need, especially when you're building a model. And then the third one is, until the fourth objective, spell out your contribution of the study. And believe me, many students, the second and third objective, you don't sometimes see it in many theses. You don't see what the student contribution is in the thesis, and this is very critical, very critical. Now, these are some of the research objectives that we have articulated earlier, and the one in purple is the one which you say is something which is new. These are all hypothetical. I'm just showing it for the examples that we are doing, okay? Now, we'll go very quickly to the literature review. Let me see my time. Okay, I have another 29 minutes. Hopefully, inshallah, I'll finish very quickly. The literature review, it's a continuous process, and this is a chapter which you don't close. Please leave this chapter until you end your study. Don't close it, because sometimes I had a brother, we were doing PhD together. He was doing something on Musharaka Mutanaqis at that time, diminishing partnership. And that time, diminishing partnership was not offered in the market in Malaysia. So although I advised him earlier, I said, don't put that statement as your problem, because if this thing is introduced while you're doing your PhD, then you'll have a problem. He said, no, I'm sure within the coming 5 years, it will not introduce. So he's happy as if it's a pioneering work. That one of his problems is that because there's nothing practical in the market, and while he was halfway through, then the market introduced musharaka mutanakhisa. And then people start saying, why then you're collecting data for your feasibility study when it's already there? Huh? So it becomes a problem. Huh? So this is an area where you leave it quite open and you continue, writing. Huh? Then you have to have the institutional background. You have to identify the research gap. And then this is one thing students usually should not hide behind literature. And I find this common really for those who write their thesis in Arabic. Maybe it's the style. The literature review comes at the beginning in the introduction, and only few literature are cited. And then they will say, this literature speaks about this, and I benefited this way from the literature. So the literature review does not really give you much magnitude. So you find students hiding behind the literature. And also there are those who write in English. They also follow the same style, that they said according to so and so, according to Chapra, according to Imran. So they're hiding behind the literature. And so you don't see the trend of the literature. You don't see, throughout these years, what is that, development in knowledge. You're not talking about one literature, two literature, but you're talking about group of literature in that area. So it also helps us, literature review also helps us to develop theoretical framework, helps us to develop hypotheses, and to identify suitable method for our studies on the variables. So these are examples that I give of the literature review. And as I told you, the sub-themes usually you will have the background of the study in the literature review. We call it institutional background. In your introduction, you only give briefly, but the detail of what you discuss in your introduction comes here. In addition to that, your literature review must also be driven by your objectives, because you have made claim in the objectives that this is what I want to achieve, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody has achieved it. Then prove it in your literature review that these objectives are justified. So in our case, we have 3 hypothetical objectives. The first one, of course, is general, and people would like to know, the issues that have been articulated and whether these issues are justified, and then what has not been discussed, etc. So second and third are more specific to your contribution. And here you need to group your literature according to those issues. What are the issues in this COVID-19? 1, 2, 3. What are the issues related to the weather? 1, 2, 3. And then you show in your discussion among group of literature. You remember, I'm using the word group of literature. I'm not using one literature. So in those group of literature, you're able to show that, well, this issue has not been discussed the way I'm going to examine it. Or past literature have stopped here, and this is where I'm going to move forward in my discussion. And these are theoretical and conceptual framework, and students normally mix between conceptual and theoretical framework. Now, in our study here, you have traffic jam, lack of interest. These you find them in past studies. Okay? So then you need to go to a theory that has established the relationship between traffic jam and absenteeism. Or sometimes you may not find the word traffic jam there. Or they may talk about being absent from work. Or being, lack of attendance, or where people do not attend critically. Oh, just a minute, let me fix my. Okay, so this is where people discuss, there's a theory. Lack of interest also, you may have a theory that discusses between lack of interest and absenteeism. These are the terms I just use hypothetical, but usually when we do studies, we will use terms that are familiar in the literature, terms that are familiar in the literature, and so you don't have a problem looking at it from a theoretical perspective. Now, these are called theoretical framework. Usually they exclude these two. Because these two, according to our assumption, there has not been any theory. This is something which is new. So when you present one table without these two, we call it theoretical framework. Then later you present also another diagram with these four, and so it becomes like conceptual framework. You are adding two. This is something you're going to use in your study. The interesting thing is later you can write at the end of your work that you have contributions to the theory. You have two extensions to the theory which you assume that people later studies, you will suggest to future studies to take this up and try to theorize this, and people will develop them later into theory. So you will have a very interesting contribution of extending this theory to two other variables. So at the same time also you need a hypothesis to look at the relationship. Hypotheses are things that are already there, and like in the case of these two, they may look at a relationship that there is a positive relationship between traffic jam and absenteeism, and they will also look at a positive relationship between these two. And then these are your new hypotheses that you need to come up with, and so later you will test this hypothesis to prove. This is a simple diagram because this is a beginning. Later maybe we can have complex diagram, especially when it relates to like structural equation modeling, etc. Those diagrams can be, or diagrams that involves moderating variables, involves intervening variables. So you may have different diagrams that we could come up with later. As I say, inshallah, we'll have more specialized talk or training later when we go to each specific chapters of the dissertation. Now, in the last part, after you have your literature review, you have your model, now you need to go to your methodology. So methodology, usually we have philosophy, we have research design, which can be either qualitative or quantitative research design. So I'm skipping this because I have only 15 minutes left. So now let me go back again. For qualitative research design, they could either be exploratory, they could be phenomenological, or as ethnography. These are usually when you want to develop a theory in ethnography. And for phenomenon, usually you study case studies of companies, etc. And also exploratory may involve some bit of case study or interviews. And usually for ethnology, you have things like grounded theory, etc. And this may require time to discuss in detail. And also these are some of the approaches that we use for qualitative literature review, interview, focus group study, etc. Now then, how do you determine your methodology? From where do you get your methodology? You get your methodology from your objectives. So usually you cannot identify your methodology unless you have clearly articulated your objectives. So for example, in our objective 1, where we want to examine issues of student absenteeism in ISO, definitely we have to go to and the word is issues. So we go to critical review of the literature. We see universities that have similar settings, similar examples like ISU. We borrow from other literature to help explain. But this is something that we have new, and for your information, if you don't have a lot of literature here, you can also include other methods. So my question is, for objective 2 and 3, what do you think would be our method of approach? I left it open for, we have Iqra there. Iqra,
can you hear?
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, Iqra.
Yes.
The question is for you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
Yes, yes, Professor. So sorry if you don't mind, can you repeat the question?
Can you hear? Are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
You can hear or not?
Yes, you can hear.
Can you see the slides?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay, let's say objective number 2. What do you think objective should we use to achieve that?
What method?
Sorry, what method? What method? Huh?
I think it should be quantitative.
Okay, what in particular? It could be like what?
I think it can be survey or questionnaire to ask the
Excellent.
students.
Excellent, excellent. What about number 3?
I think it's the same.
It's the same. Very good. Yeah, excellent.
And you know what? I also think that interviews can be conducted to students to ask maybe.
That's good.
To get more depth data.
Excellent. Excellent. So you're talking about for number 1, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
You are talking also
Yes.
number 1. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
For number 1 could also be an interview to get an in-depth. Excellent. That's a very good answer. Yeah. So when we have this, then we can get those in-depth study. So in other words, what I'm trying to say here is, let the objective determine the kind of methodology that you want to use to achieve those objectives. And this is very fundamental when we do that. Okay. So methodology, when you use quantitative methodology, which is a survey, then even if whether they are in a form of interview, which is qualitative, or quantitative in terms of questionnaire survey, then you need to have this kind of approach. You need to have a population where you take the sample from. And in our case, our population sample will be students. And if we want to know expert opinion, then we have to have lecturers or administrators who are policymakers in the areas of absenteeism. Then also the sample size becomes very important. If you have a student in the department, it's around 2,000. If you take a sample of 30 or 40, then people will say there's a problem with your sampling. There's a sampling error. So the sample has to be sufficient. The threshold has to be sufficient, and you have to prove that there is a test that we usually do in computer to prove that the sample is sufficient. Then your sampling method is also, usually people prefer sampling method to be something which is random. Random sampling, if you have a list of those students, etc., that will be interesting. But otherwise, sometimes people go for non-probability sampling. And then you need to develop your research instruments. If it is something new that you develop, then you need to validate that instrument. You need to do a pilot study. You need to do some validity and reliability tests to ensure that your research instrument is good. And then you need to collect your data. And also this is very important, how you collect your data. Then after that, you need to screen your data before you do the analysis to ensure that there's no outliers, that your samples meet all those assumptions of normality, absence of multicollinearity, etc. And then the choice also of the tools for data analysis is important. What tool you use. If the topic is complex, then your choice of data will also, and the tool of analysis will also be very, very complex. Now, so these are the results. Very quickly, I'm going through. Now, usually results, whether they are qualitative or quantitative. Here, by qualitative, I mean whether they are through interview or they are through survey. You have two parts. The first part is the profile of your respondents. And these are usually descriptive statistics. They are presented in tables. And within this table, you need to find out, why do people want to know the profile of your respondents? They want to know whether you chose the right sample, whether the people you have chosen have the right information. In other words, they just want to confirm about the reliability of the information that you have collected. And usually what many students do is they just put the table without putting some write-up about the profile. And so this does not help. So you need to write about your respondents. You need to justify why they are the right people for this study. And the quality of information that they have given is really deserving for this study. Just 1 second. Somebody's calling. Just a second.
Doctor, please unmute your microphone. Doctor, can you unmute your?
Okay. Sorry, somebody was knocking at the door. Yeah, where were we? I was talking about the profile, right, of the respondents.
Yes.
So the other thing is about presenting the results. So presenting the results, first thing is you have to present the results in tables. If it is something quantitative, you present in tables. And then when you present in tables, I'm talking about quantitative, then you need to interpret those results. You need to present those results. And then when you present those results, you tell what it is in the table. Then you interpret them. You present, interpret them, those numbers, and then you begin discussing. And so the discussion usually, okay, let me try to put it again. You have two kinds of data that you need to present. One is we begin with the quantitative. Quantitative, you have two parts, just like qualitative. You have the respondents, the people with which you have interviewed, whom you have interviewed, or where you have collected the data from. So first thing people want to know is the respondents. As I told you, both from qualitative and quantitative, they are more or less the same. People want to know the quality of the data. But when it comes to presenting the data, there's a difference between qualitative and quantitative. Let us begin with the quantitative, the survey. So the first thing we do in the survey is we put those data, descriptive data, in table forms, in a table. Then you need to present By presenting mean people want to see what those figures are relating to what. So presentation must be correctly. Then you interpret the figure. Let's say one figure is high, one figure is low. What does it mean in the context of your work? And then you do some little bit of analysis. Analysis means you're relating them to situations, or even among themselves, you can relate those analyses. Okay? So this assuming that you have two chapters. One is for results and the other chapter is for discussion. But if you have the same chapter for results and discussion, then immediately you begin your discussion or analysis of the data. So what does discussion entail? It entails means you have to compare it with past studies. Then you have to compare it with your literature and the literature review. Of course, this is where the past studies are. Do your results support what you have in your literature review, or they do not support it? Then you have to relate it to theory. If you have used certain theory, do they support those theory or do not support those theories? The other important thing is thinking out of the box. And this is where I think many students need to develop those experiences. Because thinking out of the box means you are no longer in the literature. Like in our case, we came up with the issue of COVID-19 and the issue of weather, which was not in the literature. Now, this is where experiences count. Experiences, your experiences among the colleagues, your experience of what you hear around, how to document that into, a literal sense that makes, a new direction in the literature becomes very interesting in the discussion, those experiences. Now, when you come to qualitative, this is where also I find many students have challenges. So qualitative results, either you present by theme or you present by objectives. And usually me and Dr. Sharif, we have these problems with our students. Either you present by theme or you present your results by objectives or by research questions, which is also correct. Now, where do you get the theme? The themes, you get them from the question of the survey itself, the question of the interview. Either you get it before the interview or after the interview. When people keep on repeating words, then you code and thematize those words that repetitively, there's a way of doing the coding. So they become theme for your presentation. Like in our case, if we were doing qualitative research, one of the theme will be, absenteeism due to traffic jam, maybe. And then another absenteeism due to lack of interest. We interviewed people on that. So this becomes like a theme in our question. So the first thing you do in presentation in qualitative is give the general view. Normally students start by individual interviewees or individual expert, which is not right. You need to give first, people want to know the general view first. If you have 10 people you have interviewed, what is the majority view of these 10 people? So this is the first thing first. And then what is the minority view? Later, majority, minority view. Then cite one or two interesting examples among the majority view. And if there's interesting example among the minority view, also you cite. And then you discuss why those views are. So this is what we have in our qualitative presentation of the results, thinking out of the box. Finally, we come to the conclusion and recommendations. And this is again something which I want to add to many of us here. Conclusion is not just about summarizing your work, but conclusion is also about thinking out of the box in your experiences. Now, let's look at a typical example. Suppose we want to walk from Izu to Arena Park. We are walking from Izu to Arena Park. Then I asked somebody to write a detail of how this walking journey is. Then somebody will say, okay, you come out of the main gate, you walk, you pass through the traffic light, you cross the traffic light, you go on the right, then you meet another traffic light, there is overhead bridge, but you go down. So detailed description. Then I said, okay, can you summarize to me? Okay. And so people will, you know, they'll give a summary and say it's okay. If I said, okay, give me a summary, then they'll give blah, 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 the summary. Then I said, okay, what do you conclude? Okay. So if I said, what do you conclude? Then again, you give me the same summary, then there's something missing in your conclusion. But if your conclusion goes beyond the summary, something out of the box, saying, oh, you cannot imagine, doctor, you know, as I was going out of the gate, the cool breeze that came on my face, you know, that spiritual strength that I had going down, and how my joints, I say, wow, okay, this is something out of the box. It is not the process of your results. So usually students will give me only the process of the results. What I have done, what I have achieved, what of this. But I also want something, you know, out of the box in your experience on the writing, which when I read, I know this guy is a PhD guy, you know. He has something more to contribute. Just he's a scholar, he's an expert in the area. He is commenting on what are some of the things which the literature could not extend. What are those limitations which he would have wished that the literature should have gone in that direction? So these are some of the things that we would like to see in the conclusion when we write. So this makes, and I'm sure Brother Salim will understand better, and Brother Yusuf, because they're working in those organizations which will want you to go out of the box in providing practical things. Okay, so I think we end up here, and I want you to appreciate the picture of the translator. He's still young. I don't think he's old.
Older than you, Sheikh.
So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome, yeah.
Jazakallah khairan.
Professor Kabir Hassan wants to speak. I think he's raising his
Okay,
hand.
yes. Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. Really.
It's
Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's very early in the morning, 3 a.m. I just woke
Yes.
up and I found, you know, Brother Abdul Qadir Chachi, you know, WhatsApp, you know, there is a session going on by my good friend, Mustafa Omar Muhammad. You know, one of the good thing about Brother Mustafa Omar Muhammad, may Allah bless you, that he has this knowledge of Arabic language and also the knowledge of English language, so he can bridge the gap between English and Arabic. One of the things that very often Brother Abdul Qadir Chachi said that, you know, when somebody students write, there are not many references. I think there are tons of rich resources in Arabic language, but unfortunately the English world, since I do not read Arabic or understand Arabic, so I am prevented from or not being, you know, able to use those resources. Now, you have to keep this in mind. Actually, you have to go back to our origin. We have a rich history. Now, one of these things that is happening and probably is hurting us, the research in Islamic banking and finance, first of all, it's a very new thing, right? 50 years old. We have not amassed a lot of literature. Most of the literature is still in epistemological sense, trying to figure out, trying to interpret. But unfortunately, those type of research should be done more and more in the modern parlance, modern istihad. But we do not engage in this type of research primarily for two reasons. First reason is that we do not have enough qualified supervisor who can supervise. And secondly, student interest, because if you write a paper in this area, which is more useful than writing an empirical piece, because that paper, if you write, it doesn't get into an index journal. So what does it mean? If it doesn't get into index journal, you don't get the recognition from a university, from your peer. This is very unfortunate. And actually, this is hurting us. Really, it is hurting us. I run a journal and I do a lot of empirical research. If you ask me at the end of the day, how much I'm contributing to the advancement knowledge in this area, zero to nothing. You are squeezing the same data set in different ways, different techniques. Those are the easy part to do in a research, believe me. The most difficult part is thinking, coming out of an idea, recognizing a gap. That takes a lot of research, a lot of reading, a lot of time investment. If you can do like first or second chapter, as Professor Mustafa said, then your half of the dissertation is done. And the rest, whether you follow survey, will follow secondary data. Now coming back to survey, since we do not have a secondary data, except, if you have money, these people who collect data, bank scope, or, the stock market data, very expensive, okay? And many universities cannot really afford, and if you are a young researcher, it is even more difficult to have access to this. So we rely mostly on primary research, primary data, qualitative research. But unfortunately, those are new knowledge creation. This mainstream journal don't really pay attention to qualitative or survey type of research. So that also another hindrance for the students. Now it's a quagmire. Now the question is, how do we get out of this thing? We really need to develop our own method of KPI rather than relying on what Al-Shabir is telling us, or some of us are falling into the bandwagon. We try to create all this research very quickly in order to get the citation, in order to get the bonus part from the university, blah, 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 from your top university, oh, he is our biggest researcher and so on. This is very wrong tradition, really, that is going on. I really ask, you don't need a certification. Your Islamic finance and, the big Harvard professor doesn't have any knowledge of Islamic finance. Why you have to follow him? They must follow you. Why do you have to go to Harvard? They should come to IZU because you have a critical mass of scholarly person who can guide you. But so this
Prof, I think.
Prof. It's hanging. I think his connection.
Yeah, hopefully. Yes.
Charles Yusuf is asking question.
Yes, Yusuf. Please unmute you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Thank you, Professor Mustafa, for your interesting presentation. And it's really bringing something very important in our continuing study regarding to the proposal, those who are writing proposal, and those who are going through presenting the finding. So my question was regarding on the conceptual framework. Where is the appropriate section to put the conceptual framework? Is it in the methodology section, or should be the at the
I'm not hearing. You're speaking about what conceptual framework?
The position of a conceptual framework. Which is the appropriate section to put it? Is it on the methodology section or on the literature section? It's really kind of confusing where exactly I should be putting it.
Okay, that's a good. Okay, so that's a good question. You see, it depends on the school. The way we have many madhahib, we also have a lot of madhahib in research. Some madhab, they said, because you develop the conceptual framework from your literature review section. That's why you develop the theory, so people can see how it is developed until you come up to your framework. Some other school says no, because this is something that you are going to use to collect the data. And so if you're going to use it to collect the data, so it should be in the methodology section. So both are correct depending on which school you're looking at. Maybe ISU will choose the first school where it should be in the methodology. Other universities in Malaysia will choose different methodology. For example, USIM will choose the methodology side. USM in Malaysia will choose the literature review side. So it depends on the school, but both are correct. Both are correct. There's no problem.
Thank you very much. Any other question?
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
Or a discussion. What I found in my 22 years of Islamic finance career, I found that there is a gap between the researchers as there are bombardment of researches are done, and 90%, as I agree with Dr. Kabir, that they are not of quality, and the actual practitioners in the market who are actually employing Islamic finance. So there's a huge gap between these two. They don't pay attention to any research because they don't understand this complicated research, or they say that they are not of their use. So what should we do as a researchers, as a practitioner, so that can be minimized?
Okay, I think I will first give this question to Prof. Kabir to answer, because he was talking along that line about the quality of research, where we have huge research, but the quality of research is in problem in Islamic banking and finance. Some of those who are doing the research are not really in the area, and when they produce the quality of research, it cannot be even applied in the market. So I think since Prof. Kabir was speaking along that line, maybe I give him the chance to respond also to this.
Sorry, brother, my internet connection was lost. I'm back again. Actually, the question raised by the previous brother and addressed to brother Mustafa is very pertinent. I grapple with this thing a lot. Now, let me tell you some little bit background. I'm sitting in a small state in the United States, southern state, cyclone prone, called Louisiana. University of New Orleans is about 10,000 students. By US ranking, it's a probably B+ university. And this is my only academic job for the last 32 years. I entered here after 3 years. I thought I would leave, but because of family situation and bigger responsibility, I am stuck here. Now, I have no background in Islamic finance. Even just I learned how to read Quran in Bangladesh. I'm originally from Bangladesh. I came here at the age of 19. But one thing always stuck in my mind, I never really stopped praying. Maybe Allah's wish that He guided me properly, alhamdulillah. I could have been lost, I know, at this age, 19. All of my friends who are 10 times better than me in terms of intellectual ability got lost. But Allah has kept me in this way. I'm never grateful to God. Then I started, teaching myself, again from the secondary source. If I knew the Arabic language, I could have gone to the essence of things. So, many things essence get lost in the translation process, because translation is a very, very difficult job. If you look at the golden age of history, the way we propagated knowledge through translation service, right? All the knowledge we preserved from the Greek and others and from different languages. Unfortunately, we spend a lot of money. We are not being able to what we have a treasure trove, converting into different, mostly Arabic language, into the lingua franca called English. Unfortunately, that tradition is missing. I have written things, and later on I found out very similar thing exists in Arabic language. So that not the same thing, but I'm saying if I knew the Arabic language, then I would have done it in a different way of proceeding that way. Now the problem exists is not really, of course, El Shaver is coming to university president, beautiful lady, speaks, tongue, and you are mesmerized. It tells you, oh, this is the, version of knowledge creation and dissemination. You got hooked up, you subscribe to their mechanism. Then the university or the minister, decide that we have to have a KPI, you have to have, A level, B level, C level journal, or school pass-based journal, SSCI level journal. So we are hooked up, but they forget that Islamic finance is a new knowledge base. And there are not many, only one journal that is SSCI index that does Islamic finance exclusively. It is the journal that I edit. But I'm lucky to fortunate, going through this maze. I have been on the helm of the journal for 12 years. But how many Islamic finance paper I can take? There are only 60 papers I can publish. I have 600 submission. So even though a number of good articles I have to reject because I don't have a limit page restriction, I do not have this. So we have to start from your education ministry, going down to the university president or rector, tell them we need a different KPI mechanism. And if you have it, you'll find a lot of uni scholars, those who feel the pain, those who otherwise do not have access to data, and submission fee. Like many of the journals, when you submit a paper, it may cost you anywhere between $100 to $300. Now think about it, for many developing countries, Muslim countries, $300 probably is 1 year salary if you're a young researcher, right? Now, and that paper can be rejected within a week. And all of your hard work is gone. So that is creating a very perverse incentive that's discouraging us for doing the research that needs to be done. So brother and sisters, I have to, if you are vocal, unfortunately you are not vocal because as a young researcher, you want to keep your job, but the people, those who matter on the top, they really should come forward. They have nothing to lose really. They have to speak loud because, publishing in this big name journal, and I can tell you I have many of them. If you evaluate me, the journals that I have published, conceptual paper that for me is a more value. I think is more value additive than the big papers that I have published in top journals. And even I myself ask myself, why do I do this? Maybe you can blame me. I'm also in the Venn diagram. I live in the United States. So they do not understand Islamic finance research. They think this affair is going to go away. But one thing I try to find a gap. If I have a publication there, that might encourage an otherwise non-Muslim scholar who want to look at this issue from a holistic standpoint. And I think, Alhamdulillah, I'm making a slow progress in this area, trying to influence the non-Islamic scholars in order to look into the value proposition of Islamic economics. Another thing is that Islamic economics is neglected orphan here. We do Islamic finance because it's easier to do Islamic finance because you have a secondary data or you have a survey data. Now, that probably does not answer your question, but we really need to set the agenda right. Otherwise, we'll be going into the wrong direction. And that's a long term is going to hurt us than help us. And all the techniques and everything that we do, to publish in the top journal, we are following their methodology. We do have our different methodology. If we all follow our methodology, it doesn't get accepted there. Even my paper start with something beautiful. By the time it goes to the review process, then I ask myself, what I started with, what is the end product is no similarity. They try to mold you in a way, Islamic finance and ethical finance, it exists in a different framework too. So you have to try some connection to get it accepted. You are not losing your soul, but this is not what I want to tell you. I want to tell you Islamic finance is in fact a new way of thinking, new way of helping the humanity that we really should look at that way. Think about the progression of religion. Our Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give perfection to the religion, giving our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Islam, right? So all this historical progression that happened throughout the centuries to the prophets, through different religion, it culminated final stage in Islam. And this is the message you want to give to the rest of the world, not from the religious perspective, is relation between God, the social message of Islam. You have to remember our Prophet was a social reformer. Of course, coming from a revelation, he changed an entire society. He has impacted the rest of the world. Nowhere in the human history, a reformer, a prophet has done so much. So we have to keep this in mind. And as you being in Turkey and Turkey being a focus on Islamic finance, and we really can start with a new. We don't have to depend on somebody else. We don't need somebody else validation. We can be our own validation, but we have to clean our house first. Now, another point I just want to add to the wonderful presentation, and I asked Brother Mustafa to send me this presentation because I met you some of slides, very beautiful. But the question is, you have to understand the concept of dissertation is also changing. Now, the way that you do, this is the probably practice that you do in Turkey or Malaysia or Indonesia, the steps that Brother Mustafa has mentioned. But the West, in the North America, we do not follow that process. We have to write, depending on the university, 2 or 3 papers, and the paper has to stand on its own feet. So it will have all the points that Brother Mustafa said, but you have to do 3 different things. But having said this, we have also very limited time. So let me give you an example of United States PhD. If you are entering a PhD program is between 4 to 5 years, you take 3 years of classes, coursework, in different areas, including methodology, including concept, including theory, and so on. And you have 1 or 2 years to write the 3 wonderful publishable papers. So in a sense, qualitatively or spiritually, let me say, spiritually, our method is different in North America than the rest of the world. Now, which one is better? I do not know. But in order for the publication standpoint, our method probably is better because the paper is ready to go. If you finish your dissertation in Malaysia, for example, then the dissertation is done. Then you have to spend 2 to 3 months to convert this part of the dissertation 1 or 2 papers, right? That takes also time, right? So you can think about within this framework whether you can make this a paper or the dissertation a series of articles. And you know, Europe, I was told, I didn't know, Europe, we don't have to, let's say you are a researcher yourself on your own right, you can write things. And if you publish 3 papers, you can submit these 3 papers, let's say University of Bergen, and they will accept these 3 papers as part of a dissertation. They will offer you PhD degrees. So I would also think, ask you to think out of box whether you can change the structure of the dissertation itself too. Because life is short, right? I mean, once you finish your PhD, you get a job, or in order to get a job, you need a couple of publications. If that publication can be done during the process of writing the dissertation, which is itself part of the dissertation, that will be good too. I know Malaysia has a requirement, you have to have 1 or 2 Scopus papers, that is good, but that also creates another wrong purpose incentive as well. Perverse incentive means you're focused too much on writing this Scopus paper, you try to build a connection, and sometimes, please forgive me, many times it not the it serves the students' purpose, it serves more the purpose of the faculty who is supervising the dissertation. Many cases, you really force your students to write papers for you, and that is probably also ethically not right, even though you do not want to recognize it, because I get many papers for my journal. I know for sure, or through my investigation, that the main author, who happens to be supervisor, has very little knowledge what the students have written. Please forgive me for saying this. I mean, I have to tell the truth so that we learn from the truth. Now, what it means also is that that also kills our creative purposes. And that is one time we did a evaluation of one of the PhD program in Malaysia, and this is what I found, that the students die more to write papers for their professors. In many cases, the professor don't even have an idea what they are working on. I'm sorry to say this, but I always say, I mean, even in the United States, my own student, I tell them, you are the most knowledgeable person in this area, so you educate me, because you have the time, you have to, like Mustafa said, different way how you dig into a topic, how you look at the literature review and so on, try to find your own way. In the process, I do not have that time, but the student, that is his objective, he has the time. So 99% cases in my supervises, they have a better knowledge than I do, or more current knowledge on this thing. And I have to respect that. So when it comes to helping that person, I have to also proceed accordingly. So in terms of publication, we also have to look at credit should be due to the right amount. So please keep this in mind, because this is happening, and sometimes You want to get a PhD student, he doesn't have a voice, he doesn't raise his voice, cannot say anything. But in person, being an editor, because I listen to different people, I come across all this, this concern, let me put it this way, or painful statement that I'm doing this. So we have to really, we talk about ethics, we talk about, all this beautiful Quranic principle. We really need to live with the principles of Quran. Yes, we have to do ritualistic ibadah, I have to pray 5 times a day, but that doesn't define Islam itself. I mean, we cannot really say you're not a Muslim, non-Muslim. Only Allah knows, whether your prayer is accepted or not. But Allah is not going to forgive me if I do something wrong to Brother Abdul Qadir Chachi or Brother Muhammad Mustafa. Allah is not going to forgive unless that person forgives that. So please keep this in mind. I'm sorry I said something. Please forgive
very
me
good.
out of the line.
Excellent. Jazakumullah khair. Jazakumullah khair. So like Dr. Chachi says, today is Friday, and I'm sure we have another 5 or 6 minutes to wrap up. So Brother Mirza, I think you've got a lot of answers. I remember also when we were in Doha, Prof. Kabir was saying that most of those who are dealing in Islamic finance are derivatives. And I like that term, derivatives, because they are just, hinging on certain underlying assets. They are not themselves original. So that's why we have this problem, Brother Mirza. Yes, any other question before we finalize? Or Dr. Chachi, what's your view? Do you want to? Nobody can hear you, Dr. Chachi.
Dr. Chachi, seems you are muted.
I just want to thank you, thank Dr. Muhammad Sharif for arranging this, and Dr. Kabir Hassan. Although it's too early for him there, and he contributed greatly to this. MashaAllah, thank you very much all. I have nothing to say to add.
Thank you very much, Prof. Kabir. It's really an honor to have you. And inshallah, if you don't mind, we would like also to invite you. Why not to share with us also?
Yes.
At your available time, inshallah. We'll be very happy, inshallah, to have that. So, thank you very much, Prof. Mustafa. Is there any other question before we close the session?
Yeah, I have a short question actually to Professor Kabir and Professor Mustafa. Regarding, because we have many students in the group here, just as a piece of advice, do you think we should focus more on very narrow topics and trying to be experts in a very specific issue of Islamic economics, or since the field in itself is still nascent? And I think, based on your experience, you're such a prolific writer, mashallah, you're writing on so many topics, and I don't know if it's a better use of our time to be basically not expert, but trying to brush through all the topics of Islamic banking and finance as we do in educational programs. We talk about fiqh, we talk about economics, we talk about, modern theories of economics, etc. And we tend to lose focus on one specific niche expertise area. So students sometimes are a bit lost between becoming experts of one very specific niche issue, or being, more prolific, and then having possibly better also academic opportunities because they can teach Islamic economics and banking and finance in a more orthodox way, let's say, than being, for example, in myself, I'm an expert of transport, so the infrastructure economics / Islamic economics is a very, very narrow field. So I would be very, very narrow in that area if I only write on this.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question that is shared. Maybe later Prof. Kabir will add to that. Normally, many PhD students, they ask me this question. They say, what is our objective when we are doing the program? Is it the output, or it's the skills that we have to learn? So I normally tell my PhD student that you are here to learn the skills, because if you have the research skills, you can produce a lot of things in different areas. These areas, they grow, knowledge down to remain constant, and even skills improve. But if you have the right skill sets, regardless of what you write, you will be able to produce more and more and more. So my advice to you at the moment is that learn the skills properly in whatever you're doing, whether they are in a small scale or a big scale, just acquire that skills. And then you will be able to write in any topic that you want to write to. So the second thing is what Prof. Kabir has said, which really I think is very fundamental, that because we adopt certain methodology, and this I have seen in the recent conference that we had in Indonesia, some papers were sent to me. You find 80% of the writing is students bogged down writing method of this, and that qualitative, that theoretical arguments contribution to the writing is very small. And as Muslims, إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عمله إلا من ثلاث. If we die, three things, remain on this earth. And one of the important thing is علم ينتفع به, the knowledge which people can benefit from. So that beneficial knowledge becomes very, very important. You need to have the skills, and the little contribution that you give, if it can benefit the people, I think you have done your job. So that.
May Allah make this presentation a waqf for you, Dr. Mustafa.
Amin ya
For your family, and it will be used for. We can share also the video for everybody in the world to benefit from it.
Amin ya Rab. Amin ya Rab. Amin ya Rab.
Jazakallah khairan. Is there any other question?
Yeah, I just want to add something to Brother Mustafa. First of all, you have to ask yourself, what is your mission? What do you want to do? Why do you need a PhD for? If you come to a PhD in Islamic economics, since it's a nascent field, I would start with more general, as I said, because a PhD degree is not, if you think that I'm making an expert in this area, you're wrong. A PhD degree is giving a certification that you know how to do research. Because of this thing, it's better to know more than less while you are being a student. I always tell my PhD student, this is the most productive life as a learner in your entire lifespan, because once you get a PhD, you will get a job, you have to teach, you will get married, you have children, and you have to get involved with this university politics. You have less and less. Well, I'm not saying that you will, but it will be drawn into different complexities of life. So you will have less and less time to devote to learning and understanding new stuff. Believe me, I can tell you, and Mustafa and Abdul Chachi will probably collaborate with me. This is what is happening. The amount of quality research time becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's better to devote, not being a narrow field. You try to learn as much as you can. And unfortunately, the reason I'm saying this, because Islamic finance has not become really, or economics as a holistic field yet. If you look at a PhD program or a master's program or a bachelor's program, what do you have? Let's say a bachelor's in Islamic banking. So out of 10 classes, 6 are conventional banking finance class, right? And you bring in Sharia, few classes there, and make it Islamic banking finance program. But does it really make it Islamic banking finance program? Unless we develop the curriculum where each class that you take, that it will come from the epistemological perspective of Islamic Sharia or Islamic value system and the modus operandi that we borrow from the Western world. Please don't discard the Western microeconomics, macroeconomics, economic tool. These are also shared prosperity, right? A shared history that we cannot really deny.